I am Brian Mays. Follow along on our adventures chasing all kinds of game in the heartland of America. Our passions run from the North Woods rivers all the way out to the wild and wide open prairies. We are untamed, and wild is all we chase. This is the Amazing Outdoors Podcast.
Oh, that's a ski, dude. That's a moss ski.
There's one on the tree right there.
Oh, there goes another one. That's a good way to start the morning. I'm gonna drink some of my beer quick.
There's a woodcock. What's going on, ladies and gents? Brian Mays back for another episode of the Amazing Outdoors Podcast. We have a topic that has been pressing and on the minds of a lot of outdoorsmen and women. Today's guest is John, the public land advocate on Instagram, and we're going to dive into what's really going on with the potential sale of our public lands. Before we hit the roll button with today's show, a reminder about HW launchers. If you're in the market for a bird launcher or pigeon launcher this spring for your summer training needs, head on over to hwlaunchers.com and tell Jeremiah you heard about his launchers here on the Amazing Outdoors Podcast. A couple quick ones. If you haven't donated to the Prairie Chicken Project here in Wisconsin, head on over to the Prairie Chicken Project of Wisconsin. Drop them a couple bucks. Every dollar goes right back into conservation for prairie chickens. Wisconsin Sharp-tailed Grouse Society could use a few new members, so if you're looking at wanting to join conservation group, head on over to Wisconsin Sharp-tailed Grouse Society's website and think about becoming a member there too. Also want to mention RPM training products. If you're in the market for some slip leads or check cords, head on over to RPM training products and check out their line of training leads and slip leads. But enough about that. Let's get on with today's show. All right, folks, I'm really excited for our guest today. I have John, the public land advocate on Instagram. John, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's the public land advocate.
You got it in there.
I did. You said that's what you wanted to hear. I told you I'd get it in there. We'll make it the first thing.
Well, John, Can you kind of enlighten us a little bit? I mean, I follow you on Instagram. I notice a few of my at least close friends follow you on Instagram. I think what you're doing is an invaluable service to the rest of us outdoorsmen. But for the listeners who may not know who you are, can you kind of give us that high level view of what the public land advocate is all about?
Sure. The public land advocate is about advocating for public land in a nutshell. I know name fairly much gives it away. But what I'm really about is realizing that public land and helping people realize public land, no matter how we use it, whether you hike, fish, hunt, forage, overland, camp, or you're going to your local city's playground, or you're going to go play some pickup softball with your friends on a public baseball diamond. That public land is an integral resource that we have in the United States, and as someone who fishes, hunts, and does a lot of things on public land, I've noticed that it sometimes seems to lack advocacy, especially where I'm from in Oklahoma, where a lot of issues we saw with public land, my buddies and I were out duck hunting or deer hunting or foraging for mushrooms or just going fishing. So it made me realize that if I want to have this land for the rest of my life and then into future generations, it needed a voice. And it kind of started out of this genesis. And I'll be honest with listeners, I was listening to the Meat Eater podcast, and I heard Steve Ranella say something that was just markedly untrue. And I was like, somebody's got to get the truth out there. So it kind of started a little bit in spite, but the whole premise behind this is demonstrating not only the necessity of public lands, but getting people to go out to use public land and to demonstrate the beauty that for the vast majority of Americans who live in metropolitan areas, it's not as far away as you think. I know I live in the biggest city in Northeast Oklahoma, Tulsa. And if you live in Tulsa, you're a 20-minute ride from two major lakes. You have literally tens of thousands of acres that you can go explore. And the vast majority of people here, unless they hunt or fish, have no clue about it. And so I think the more people who use it, the more argument that we can have to get more of it. And I don't know about you, but I know I'm definitely not going to sneeze if we get more land to fish, hunt, and explore on. So that's kind of what started the Public Land Advocate and why I decided to make an Instagram to advocate for issues. Sometimes we pick fights. Sometimes we pick fights over issues that are super important to us, like we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, it's I'm definitely not going to complain or have anything much to say but two thumbs up regarding more public land. As a rough grouse hunter, died in, and really a wild bird hunter just in general, public land and the availability to pack my dogs up and just go somewhere. We are blessed here in this country, but at the same time, I would love to have more of it.
For sure. I wouldn't sneeze at that. I mean, my whole mission is to get us more of it, or at least to stop it from going away. Well, which is, to me, super terrifying.
It is very terrifying. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to have you on. I have been following you for a while on Instagram, and you seem to have a little bit better knowledge of, or at least maybe the initiative than the average guy to dive into some of this word salads of congressional bills and House bills and statutory, all the the lawyer speak. We'll just say that. And with kind of where we're at today, the sale of public lands, at least in the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And I don't know that a lot of us, so we'll just call them sportsmen and women, really know what to do other than, call a congressman and make your voice heard. My frustration and again, kind of the impotence for this conversation today was I've seen quite a few of, the conservation organizations that I love to support and think they're doing great work on the habitat space and opening up private lands for public hunting. They've been very silent on this whole issue of public lands being sold. There are some that have spoke up, but, a large majority of the conservation groups that I support really haven't said a whole lot. And that's concerning. And I wanted to see what we could do to kind of slice through the noise and get down to the brass tacks today on what's really going on and, what would be, your advice to the listeners on what we can all do about it. So, maybe we can, dive into a high level view and we'll kind of slice that down to a little bit more of a microscopic or a macro and a micro conversation here. So what you hear it in the news, public lands might be up for sale. And then there's some loud voices out there. I would say to certain groups of people and myself included sometimes, there's a lot of fear mongering. So when I hear this go around, it's like, well, what's really going on?
Yeah. I will say that you have to be conscientious when you start reading into these things to get through the noise, and to find out what's really going on. And, Aaron Schmautz from the Primitive Republic podcast and I kind of stumbled onto this issue at the same time. We were messaging back and forth because I had a rough day and I said something I didn't want to say to that person. And he was like, "Are you mad because of this?" And I was like, "I wasn't, but I am now." And what that is the House Natural Resource Committee put out an 11th hour amendment after 13 hours of debate on a bill that they're putting forward that included, when it was first reported, and I'll give you the sources that reported this so I can be as transparent as possible. When it was first reported on by the AP News, and I know some people might not trust the AP News, so we do have also the Salt Lake Tribune. We also have let me pull it up real quick, the Las Vegas Review-Journal, all from the same date, reporting that Representatives Celeste Malloy from Utah and Mark Amadei from Nevada, were proposing the sale of, as it was first reported, 100,000 acres of federally owned land in both Utah and Nevada.
Okay.
So that was the issue that started all of this noise. And the scariest thing to me is they put this amendment forward and refused to take public comment about the issue. So they didn't reveal the bill to you and me, people like you and I, to go, hey, like, what's going on with this?
Yeah, that doesn't usually pass the smell test.
No, for sure. What makes it worse is that in the 7 days that we've all been talking about this bill, that number of 100,000 acres, because it was originally supposed to be 10,000 in Utah and 90,000 in Nevada, jumped to right now almost 500,000 acres. So it's a big difference from what they first told us to what they're actually talking about doing now.
Well, and let's, I guess, maybe step back a little bit so people can kind of understand where this is coming from, because I think,
sure,
given at its current stage, things can change a lot, both good and bad. So it started in a House subcommittee for the Natural Resources Board, if I understood things correctly. Is that what?
So,
and what
it started there, and they passed it. So now it's going to the House and Senate for a vote.
And it is attached on to a larger bill.
Yes, it is attached to a larger bill.
Yeah, so oftentimes these this is kind of pork barrel stuff inside of a larger bill. What bill is it largely attached to? Maybe not the number, but what is is it an agricultural bill, Department of Interior bill?
It's what they call the Big Beautiful Reconciliation Bill.
Oh, and
it's to generate revenue and for the United States federal government to offset, and this is directly from the House Committee on Natural Resources, whose chairman is Bruce Westerman, press release May 7th, 2025, offset the Trump tax cuts that are happening so the federal government can recoup some of the money from those tax cuts. Is how it is partially being pushed.
Well, I'm in personally a rock and a hard place with this, because I think tax cuts are good, but they have to also be paid for. Where my spidey sense goes up and where my foot goes down is, I think there's a lot of other places to offset tax cuts within the federal government, i.e. spending. There are a lot of places that the federal government could probably trim back spending and not cut off access to publicly owned assets like land and the availability to recreate on that land.
I tend to agree with you. I also think one way we can work to curb spending is better federal oversight of what we're doing as a federal government. I don't know why
agree.
It costs the federal government $100 to buy a 16-ounce hammer, but it does. And that's one of the more famous examples of government wasteful spending that we have. I think there's a lot we can do before we even get to this point.
That's kind of
public lands.
I think where a lot of people are at is like, well, how do we get to this point? You and I both agree there are places in government that we could probably have a little oversight and trim back at least the amount of revenue that this is going to offset. I'd argue that there's probably a lot more, enough so that we could actually come up with money to probably buy more land. But that's a whole rabbit hole we don't need to go down today. At the end of the day, I would just like to see my tax bill a little less, and I continue to want to see more access for people, because on this is a multifaceted issue, and this is again one of the reasons I wanted to get you on. I think you have a good take on a lot of these different facets. You look at, you mentioned Meat Eater, but QF, PF, Whitetail Unlimited. Every one of these conservation groups has been banging on the drum for R3 initiatives, recruitment, reactivation, and retention, to get more hunters, so we can increase our Pittman Roberts spending, so we can also have more advocates out there for these public spaces. But at the same time, now our federal government is potentially limiting those spaces by the sale of public land. And I'm sure through regulations and other ways that we definitely, are not going to cover here today. But anyways, they're limiting access, and you have these conservation groups haven't said a word. I know I've seen more grouse hunters in certain areas of my state before than I have in the past. I'm not bitching about that, but at the same time, if Wisconsin was losing hundreds of thousands of potentially acres here, one might start bitching about that. So I think that there's a rather polarizing side to this, and conservation organizations are kind of stuck in the middle and more or less impotent on this conversation. They don't want to pick a side. And I'd argue that at some point you got to pick a side.
I think you do. I think you have to pick a side, and I think the side is with the average guy. I know that myself and a couple people I think that are also in your circle, we started calling organizations out for this. And we have now, between myself and one other person, gotten 6 organizations. Granted, they're not as big as some of the ones who are silent, but we got the Ruffed Grouse Society is planning to make a public statement about this after we called them out for being silent on it. They sent out 3 hours after we made a couple posts where they were tagged in. They sent a whole blog post to all their members, made it publicly available on the internet, on their website. And then now they're preparing social media stuff to go out as well, which is nice. Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, I wish they were louder. They had like a real quick one picture post that led to a longer article on both of their websites.
Yeah, which more or less led to, I think it was the Theodore Roosevelt Foundation, who actually did some work on this and made it really easy for people to make a couple clicks and send out at least like the generic break, and it gave you, you went there, you could call your congressman. They did a really nice job with this, what was last week. Pheasants Forever kind of seemed to tag on to that, as well as, Onyx did. They did a fair push, but it was just kind of, it's that one day.
Yeah.
And it's where's the noise? And now we're learning that there's more acres up for sale too.
Yep. I can tell you, and this person asked to remain nameless, so I'm going to protect their rights. They do work for Onyx, and Onyx, even though they've been kind of mired in some controversy with some purchases and licenses their owner has gotten, they have been beating the back channel drum very hard for this. to the point where some of the letters that have gone out to organizations that are out there who haven't made a peep yet that do offer membership discounts with Onyx, Onyx said they're considering pulling their membership discounts.
Well,
so if you're a member of some of those organizations, they get you 10% off, and your organization stays quiet. That's who you got to point the finger at, not Onyx. Onyx is trying to make the noise in more of a business sense, which I get because they are a business, but at the same time, be loud.
Well, just because you're a business doesn't mean you have a hall pass on this. And I think, from their perspective, they have been single-handedly responsible for opening up a lot of recreation on public lands, and good for them for finding a business model for it. I'll be honest, I probably couldn't do my job as a hunting guide without a tool like Onyx. I just couldn't. I could do it. I mean, it's just made me way more efficient. I used to be able to do it with Google, but it's just made me more efficient and really a better hunter. And I think that's across the board now with what Onyx has done. So for them to be quiet, really, as a business, that shed some really bad light. But there's other businesses out there in this space that haven't jumped on the bandwagon. And there's a lot of private entities that could be much, much louder. And I commend you and the other people out there for calling these organizations out, because that's the only way we're going to see change.
I 100% agree with you. I mean, we started with organizations, we tagged businesses, we have moved on to influencers now too, who have made money and sponsorship dollars off of famously, hunting public land and taking some incredibly majestic animals off of those public lands. I'm real picked off at Weatherby for staying silent, because when Roy Weatherby started the company, he was one of the biggest proponents of the North American model of making sure that land access was had, so that all of his calibers could go be used and he could get real data. And, now I think it's his grandson, Adam Weatherby, or son, Adam Weatherby, is running the company, and they have stayed quiet. And that is a 180-degree change from the company that Roy Weatherby had started. And I'm disappointed because I personally enjoy some of the firearms that Weatherby has put out. My dad is a huge Weatherby supporter. Was the first rifle he bought when he got a full-time adult paycheck was a Weatherby Mark V and 7 Weatherby Magnum. And I had a phone conversation. He's like, I can't believe that company that started by trying to get people to go outside and to chase whitetail deer, and then to go west and chase elk and sheep and everything else that the world has to offer, is now a ghost when it comes to this.
It is a little on the sad side when you really... I would argue that private corporations have the biggest vested interest in stepping out. When you look at you mentioned Rough Grouse Society, they get a lot of grant dollars from the U.S. government.
Yep.
It's easy not to upset the apple cart in that state. But when you're a firearms manufacturer trying to appeal to a sportsman, where's the National Rifle Association?
Where's SCI? Where's Ducks Unlimited? Where's Delta? Where's the RMEF? Or for those who aren't familiar, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Where's the National Wild Turkey Federation? I can't tell you about the NWTF because they blocked me.
What's the common thread between those companies, though, or those organizations?
So most of them run their entire organization on USDA dollars.
Yep, grant dollars. So my point, I guess, is you have private corporations who don't receive grant dollars. They should be the first ones, and we should be dragging along all of these conservation organizations after that. But I can understand why some of them have stayed silent from a conservation standpoint. The private companies and groups like, the straight up hunting access, the Sierra Club,
Mm-hmm.
So you had shared some information. Speaking of, I meant the Safari Club International, SCI, but you had shared some information with me a couple of days ago about how the Sierra Club had actually jumped on board on this, and kind of reached across the aisle in kind of the first time ever.
So the Sierra Club, from the research that Aaron and I did when we were working on our his podcast that I was on over the same issue, they were the first to come out and say something. And they said, whether you are hiking, camping, visiting, picnicking, or whether you're hunting or fishing, public land is for everybody. And I thought I would die before I saw the Sierra Club side with hunters. And to give the audience and listeners some perspective, I'm 37 years old, and I couldn't believe that I was reading that from the Sierra Club, who were supporters of a lot of anti-hunting initiatives that had been going around the United States. For them to just stop on a dime and be like, nope, these are people who need our support. Even if we're on the opposite side of many issues, that should alarm a lot of people.
Well, it sure should alarm the folks in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they don't want. They
don't want us all to work together.
So kind of back to the procedural things.
Mm-hmm.
Where we're at today is this bill is going to the House floor and Senate floor.
Yes.
And at this point, things can get pushed back into committee. Changes can happen to the and often do a lot of times with these bills at this stage. How do we, how do we, what is the average guy, what can they do to try to inflict some change on this situation?
I can tell do the same thing that I'm doing. Be out on social media. Go to the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation. I forget what the P stands for, and I wrote it down. Partnership. The Theodore or TRCP. Go to their website. Call the switchboard. Ask for your senator. Ask for your Congress person. Leave them a voicemail. Then, after you leave them a voicemail, go to the email setting where you just got to put your information in, and they send an email to both of your state senators and your congressional representative at the click of a button. Because that's what it takes. If you're somebody who likes to write a letter and send it to them, but I don't know if it'll get there in time. I'm a huge proponent of physical contact between you and your reps or senators at any level, whether it's your state level, whether it's your federal level, because if there enough letters pile up on someone's desk, it's real hard to ignore that stuff. And I made the joke with Aaron, sometimes when we get emails, it's real easy to just put your phone in your pocket, make sure it doesn't make any noise or vibrate. But when we're stacking letters and your phone's blowing up, you got to pay attention. And then number 2, hammer the organizations that you are a part of. I have emailed a couple people at Ducks Unlimited every day about this issue, to the point where I'm sure they just route my emails to their spam box. I have contacted I've contacted my senators and my representative every day through the TRCP. I've even contacted my governor with this issue and other issues, and I try to make sure that I'm keeping up with it until I get a response from them. hopefully that response isn't like a black Chevy Suburban showing up in my driveway telling me to be quiet. But I try to do it. We have to do that. And I think one of the important things that people need to hear right now is that according to an article from the Review Journal in Nevada and the AP News, the Salt Lake Tribune, and the Washington Post, these were all published this week, so since Monday, there is bipartisan opposition to this bill. So it's not Democrats versus Republicans. It's not an apolitical issue or a one-sided political issue. Everyone is upset about this. And we have to keep those people upset. And I think that's something that we haven't seen face a bill that has come in front of our Congress and Senate at this point in time. Is so many people on both sides of the aisle like, this is not cool.
Well, I think it has bipartisan support, and I think, right now, our political scheme of things is so polarized. There is a crowd of people out there right now that want to say, well, Trump's going to sell off our land. And I think, it's possible if the House and Senate put a bill that's, that he could sign on the desk. But at the end of the day, that's where he comes in. Right now, I think we have to remember that this is being initiated at our state representative and senator level. And that's where the engagement is. And if you have bipartisan support, that should never get to a president's desk to sign.
No, you keep saying bipartisan support. Just to clarify, it's bipartisan opposition to this bill being passed.
I'm sorry, but yes, support to kill sales of public land is where I was coming from, and I apologize.
Yes. No, you're good. I also think, and if we can get into this, I wrote this down, and I think it's important for people to hear. Especially when we talk about the climate, the political climate, is that there is some backroom stuff that has been uncovered by people doing diligent research. And I think whether you're Democrat, Republican, apolitical, no one wants to see corruption happening in Washington. And this bill, this amendment was put forth by, I said earlier, Celeste Malloy and Mark Amoti. It's important to note that some of this land that's coming up, the sale directly benefits Representative Malloy's family in some legal troubles they're having with the Bureau of Land Management and the federal government.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And we
Washington's a very, very simple creature when you start to look at it. Follow the money.
Mm-hmm. So that's what my research for this too has been, and I've been very vocal about who's paying the representatives for their campaign that went into this. And one of the items that we've uncovered through our research is that Malloy is the niece of Cliven Bundy. For people who might not be familiar or might not know that name, Cliven Bundy was famous in orchestrating 2 armed standoffs with the federal government over the Bureau of Land Management, trying to enforce grazing rights on different parcels of public land. One of those parcels of public land, the Gold Butte Monument, which was created by President Barack Obama in 2016, was the center point of those issues. Cliven Bundy in 2018 petitioned Trump to remove the Gold Butte Monument from federal protection for this. And now his niece has made that part of public land of the 200,000 acres in Clark County. Part of that could be where Bundy still has 700 head of cattle on our national monument and currently owes over $1 million in back grazing fees to the BLM. And the sale of this public land, for those who aren't familiar, usually comes with the wiping of debts that you would owe on it. And it's happened before with other grazing permits for BLM land that's been sold off to other ranchers. And it's very interesting that you're wiping away $1 million that the IRS could come after your family if this land gets sold.
Well, that don't pass the smell test. I mean,
No.
in all reality, I mean, these are, I did notice she's a Republican and you know, whatever side of the fence you're on, these make all Congress people look bad, these kind of deals. And they shouldn't be allowed, to be honest with you. But that's a whole nother conversation for the Federalist side in me. So.
Yeah. I can tell you, I hate to sound like that person, but if you follow the money, it gets worse. 3 of the biggest anti-public land advocacy groups in the United States are all major contributors to Malloy's and Modi's campaign. And those folks would be the National Association of Realtors, the National Association of Home Builders, and the National Cattlemen's, North American Cattlemen's Beef Association. All of those organizations have at numerous times in our recent history, I'm going to say recent histories from 2000 to where we are now in 2025, written posts on their website and in other magazines, newspapers, and websites about how the federal government shouldn't have any public land. They should all go to either private land in the Cattlemen's Beef Association's case, or it should be sold off to the states in the case of the National Association of Realtors and Home Builders, so that the states can sell it to developers.
I don't even really know what to say about that. I don't swear on the podcast often, but that's shit. And I guess people really need to understand that. I hate realtors. I really do. If you listen to this podcast and you're a realtor, I don't hate you as an individual, but I hate the confounds of how you do business. I think it's just absolute bureaucratic crap that somebody's going to list my home and skim off the top. Now, I did sell a home, and bless her heart, Danielle, she earned every damn dollar of it. But I don't see too many realtors willing to come into the house and go, you have too much on your plate. Let me paint the house for you. Like, it just doesn't happen. So I found a diamond in the rough there, and I do appreciate everything she did. But I never realized that those organizations played a real big role. And I think that's common across probably most sportsmen's mindset. The National Realtors Association. But when you really start to think about it in the paradigm that we're talking about, why would they have any interest in public land? And it's kind of scary when you think about how powerful that lobby is. They have a lot of lawyers in Washington.
Yeah. And
us common sportsmen, we have some lawyers in Washington too. But I think that's the whole point of this conversation is that we're trying to wake the sleeping giant to push on the conservation organizations who have the lobbyists in Washington.
Most certainly. And I can tell you the first press release Amadei put out was that this land was supposed to be predominantly used for building low-cost homes. Well, who's going to build that low-cost home? National Association of Home Builders. Who's going to sell it? National Association of Realtors. And then all of a sudden, as this bill has continued to evolve and more has come out about it, well, now we're going to start selling it to ranchers, to farmers, to people who are going to lease it for energy, mining, all sorts of things. And, oh, wow, all of those people who are going to make money off of our former public land contributed to these folks' campaigns.
The rabbit hole goes deeper.
It does. It does. Aaron and I joked, we're like, man, I feel like we got to put tinfoil hats on and like start putting our cell phones in chip bags for like what we're talking about at this point, because people are going to think we're crazy. That like there's, all these people who have worked for so long against the interest of sportsmen to make themselves not only richer but more powerful are now having orchestrated this move for divesting Americans from their ecological inheritance, which is public land. And to make matters worse, NEPA, which is our licensing agency in the United States federal government, had language put in there that if you paid for this land and you mined, if you paid 6 times the amount of a normal permit, they would protect you from lawsuits. And what that means is if you mine, pump oil, or do something that could ecologically damage the land, they will protect you from lawsuits from conservation groups and lawsuits from people who are affected by the downstream effect of your business.
That allows businesses and private interests to do things that normally they wouldn't. Because nobody shits in their own sandbox. I mean, come on now. Like, you have to be pretty dumb to, like I said, shit in your own sandbox. But when you have protections that allow you to shit in the sandbox and cover it up and nobody knows the difference, now you start doing those things. That just shouldn't be allowed. I mean, you can talk about all kinds of things that the federal government does in outside of, the conversation we're having today, that they grant, these types of protections to, and to be honest with you, it's just a very bad practice. It leads to a lot of unethical things being done. And ethics should be, something we all strive for to be better at every time. I mean, you look at the sportsmen and women, the conservation organizations, I think they're some of the most ethical people out there. The guy who, cares about his habitat and is putting the work in, he's not out there murdering everything and just ripping backstraps off and letting carcasses rot. He's not the bad apple in the bunch. So we don't get to play by those rules. Why should corporations and private entities that, basically kiss the ass of the federal government get to play that game? I don't know. Yeah,
I 100% agree with you on that. I mean, I think when we talk about the average sportsman, most of us care more about our environment than a lot of other people because we interact with it. I'm blessed in the job that I have and the field that I'm in that I get to spend a lot of time outdoors and not just on the weekend. And I can tell you that one of the first advocacy things I did, and people in Oklahoma hate it, they were not fans of it, was to get shotgun holes classified as littering. Because my friend and I went to one of the popular wetland development units, and we picked up 2 5-gallon buckets of shotgun holes after the opening weekend of teal season. And we took a picture that got circulated.
My bird vest, man. Like, I mean, that's all I pick up is hulls. I actually have an acquaintance of mine gave me a sticker that he had made, and it says empty hulls are littering. And I'm guilty of it, man. When I was young, I just shot, didn't care two shits about it. But when I started taking people out and really having to care more about the environment than just an average hunter, looking at it as a resource and how do you not impact that resource negatively, I started picking my stuff up. And I pick up customer hauls all day long. I tell them to pick it. Mm-hmm. Well, it usually starts by picking up a couple hauls that they shoot. And then normally good folk will see that I'm picking them up and they'll pick them up too. You just kind of lead by example. But sometimes it's like, no, man, pick that up. Like I've picked up 6 or 7 of them from you today. Like, I don't, and I do it in a kind way. It's like, dude, I don't need other guys out here finding, empty halls and knowing where my grouse holes are at. Like pick them up.
Right, yeah.
But at the end of the day, like who wants to go walk in the woods? I have a, similar experience where I didn't leave with buckets, and I commend you for doing that and raising hell. But I was down in southeast Kansas, southwest Kansas, damn close to the Oklahoma border. And it was hunting bobwhites, and there was stock ponds around, stock tanks. And we dove hunt up here, but not like they do down south. And I was just like, I couldn't believe it. There's critters, there's animals that are supposed to be coming in here for water, and the whole entire ground is shotgun holes. I mean, it was just like, this is unreal. So what happened down in Oklahoma? You raised some hell and got a lot of pushback? I just don't understand the pushback.
We got a lot of pushback from guys like, the plastic goes away. I'm like, are you stupid? Because the brass will eventually rot. That plastic's there forever. And a bunch of people thought it was stupid. Some game wardens were like, oh, great, it's one more thing for us to do. And we kind of did something that made some people angry, is we got a few bird watching groups to support us and to speak out at the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife and Conservation's public hearing, which takes place every December. And they're like, hey, we're out here just like you guys are, but we're not leaving stuff behind. We're taking pictures. We're watching birds. And they're a pretty vocal group when you get them angry. And it was like one of the few times that a couple bird watching organizations and concerned hunters in Oklahoma worked together to beautify Oklahoma, where one of them wasn't trying to fight against hunting and the other wasn't trying to fight for hunting. It was like, let's just do our best job. And that irritated people, because I think some people think that if you're on the opposite side of some issues, you're on the opposite side of every issue, and that's just not the case. And they passed it. I don't know how many tickets they've wrote about it, but I know that opening day of duck season at several of the wetland development units, if you look up on some of the hills around there, you'll see game wardens with binoculars, Oklahomans, and they're watching you to see if you're picking up those shells, because that's the law now. And this year we did see significantly less shotgun holes left behind. So already a good impact for us. And I think it's little things like that we sportsmen have to remember to do when we're out in the woods, Every time I'm out in the woods, I have
just makes my head spin that you guys had to do that, and it ruffled feathers along the way. We should have never gotten to that point. Never gotten to that point, because the sportsmen and women should freaking police their own. Do better. You want to come around and freaking pick up and shoot ducks out of a pond, like at least make an effort. I understand some of them go in the water. You might not be able to find every one of them, but what's so difficult about picking that up? I mean, I look at it as a simple fact. Like, if you're not going to do it for the environment, do it for at least the fact that you're going to protect your spot a little. Like, you're not broadcasting everywhere that, hey, I sat here and blasted freaking 2 boxes of shells. Like, I mean, as a hunter, I look at that and go, okay, somebody killed killed a few birds here. Like, I might have to put that on my radar, you know, like, I just don't get it. I really don't. It's not that hard to be a decent person.
I will tell you, and I use, I'm going to be honest, I like you do, I use Onyx. If I find shotgun shells in an area I want to hunt, I drop a pin. If I find a busted arrow where it's like the back half or front half of an arrow that looks like it had been shot at a deer, drop a pin. If I find rifle casings, drop a pin. I'm like, you told me that there's something worth looking at here, and it might not be here while I'm here, but it's here, and I'll be back probably before you will be. Figure it out. And that's what I think a lot of guys, when they're like, I don't know how somebody found my secret spot. You know, if the guy...
You left your freaking Twinkie wrappers there. I mean, come on now. Yeah. Like, the only reason I looked up in the tree and saw the tree stand up there was because there's a soda can and 5 Twinkie wrappers on the ground. Like, come on now, dude.
Yeah, and I never get why people get upset about that. But, you know, my duck hunting partner and I, we bring a trash bag with us now. And it's not uncommon for us to go to a wetland development unit or go to a boat ramp and then not leave with at least a half full bag of trash that we find. And we don't blame all of it on hunters. So we can try to make ourselves feel better about ourselves as a community. But we, again, our whole thing is like, you know, all it takes is one pissed off, well-connected person to raise enough cane at the state level that now we're all in hot water.
Well, you know, let's go there. I think we'll leave a little time at the end for listeners for you to kind of speak your piece on the private land sale or the public land sale stuff, kind of give maybe it's a call to action with some of that. But you look at what's going on in Oklahoma right now. There's a lot of people raising hell about this. I think it was $100, some kind of extra non-resident permitting fee with handwritten permission. What is that? Number one, because I think there's a lot of people concerned about that maybe going to other states. And number two, what's your take on how you got there? Like, why is this happening?
Oh, man. Okay, so that's Oklahoma Senate Bill 448, which was signed by our governor, much to the chagrin of some of us here in Oklahoma who tried a last-minute campaign to try to get him to add a couple of protections for public land. And you travel to hunt. I travel to hunt. We've talked about that. And the way we got here is Oklahoma's Texas's hat. We get a lot of hunters that come from Texas north to Oklahoma because Texas, while being the largest state in the continental United States, has the least amount of huntable public land of any state in the United States adjusted for land mass size. And, you know, I'm 3.5 hours from Dallas-Fort Worth. And there's 12 million people there. And so these Texas guys come up and people get mad that there's guys who take a week off of work to hunt in what they think is prime whitetail or prime turkey or prime duck season. And they hunt spots that locals want to be in. And we had a ton of what they call anti-Hoosier or OOSER for out-of-state hunter clamoring. And so the state said, this is the solution, you know, and this clamoring has been going on for 2 years. Last year, the state voted to raise non-resident license fees. And, you know, I'm okay if a state is going to talk about raising fees if they direct it to the problem. And they said that the non-resident license fee is going up. So now if you want to hunt deer with a bow and a gun in Oklahoma and ducks, you pay $700 for the season.
As a non-resident.
Or upland birds as a non-resident. And we went from being the cheapest state for deer hunting to one of the most expensive. And one of the ways the ODWC tried to get this explained was, yeah, but in Oklahoma, you can harvest 6 deer, 2 of them being antlered bucks every year as an out-of-stater. So they're like, yeah, you're paying like $125, $120 a deer. And it's like, yeah, but they were paying $250 for all those deer, right? And then you guys campaigned on this to raise prices because public land was being strained. And instead of dedicating that money to public land improvement specifically, it went into your general fund, which could be used to buy trucks, gear, fix fences and things like that. It could also be used for habitat, but it's not directly marked to buy more public land, to preserve and enhance and enrich habitat. It's not gone to preserve resources. And that's the same thing with this new Senate Bill 448, which adds another $100 fee on top of it. And this is the second price increase. If you hunt some public land in Oklahoma, we have the Oklahoma Land Access Program. 2, they passed a bill that says if you want to hunt OLAP, everyone, out of state, in state, pays an extra $150 to try to open up more access. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll pay that every year. I don't care because I want to see more access. The problem is, within 6 months, they hammered out Bill 448 to make out-of-staters pay $100 because habitat's degraded. There's a strain on boat ramps. There are other issues that they found. And basically, they want to say that it's to give Oklahomans the chance to have better competition to get public land over out-of-state hunters. And I would be, I would argue if you told me that money was going to resource development, so we were getting more wetland development units, better operating wetland development units, we were getting more crops put in to areas to enhance deer habitat, enhance deer survivability. If you were fixing boat ramps or building more boat ramps, if you were buying more public land, I'd give you $100 as an Oklahoma resident. But it's not. It's going to the general fund, which could be used for anything the ODWC has. And then our new director of the ODWC said that this land or this money in the general fund can be used for all the things that we want, but we're not going to make it specific. You guys can tell us about it in December at our public comments, or you can call Wade Free is our director's name, and I'm going to say his phone number, which is 405-522-6279, and let him know your opinions on this. Because why should you as an out-of-stater pay more to hunt in Oklahoma if all that money is not going to fix any of the problems this bill and previous bills have campaigned on fixing?
Do you think the motivation behind this is that they're just trying to make it painful for out-of-state hunters so that you have less out-of-state hunters?
I think that's part of it. There's also other legislation that's being discussed and debated right now that's trying to turn Oklahoma into a little bit of Texas. And that to me is scary because it's all legislation that exempts high game fence operations, private game ranches, professional hunting or commercial hunting operations from all of these laws. So 448, if you're a high game fence, commercial hunting operation, or private hunting ranch / professional hunting commercial operation, and you bring clients, they don't have to pay. And I was like, weird that you guys had to put that in the bill because you specifically said public land.
Well, and it's odd too, because I hate to say it, but most of those clientele, $100 doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So
$100 doesn't matter to them.
why would you be losing out the opportunity to raise habitat funds?
Exactly. Right? Like they can pay $100. Then we have Senate Bill 208, which is about commercial guide operations and guide licensing requirements that is now on the governor's desk. And we started writing, I've been writing the governor about this. Kevin Stitt, I've been like, hey man, like make sure that like you say that these funds have to go where the bill's campaigned on. Make sure that you exempt public land from being able to be guided on in Oklahoma, which is what we've done for the longest time. Is if you buy a guide, if you're a guide, you can only take clients on private land, whether it's leased, whether it's a day lease, you own it, etc. And they had that in the bill, and they took it out. But they made sure to exempt high game fence operations, private hunting ranches, professional and commercial hunting operations from having to procure the same license that you would if you wanted to guide in Oklahoma.
It's a tough spot, man. It is. You can't have those kind of operations operating on a public land basis, especially in a state like Oklahoma, where public land is not a high resource.
No, and it gets worse. They tabled until 2026 Senate Bill 338, which goes against what the ODWC wants and would limit the harvest of antlered deer, whether whitetail or mule deer, to one deer per hunter, whether you're in state or out of state, unless you go to a high game fence, private hunting ranch, or commercial/professional hunting organization. And then you can harvest as many as you can pay for.
So let me get that straight. The Oklahoma Department of the OD, what did you call it? Because I'm from Wisconsin now.
ODWC. It's the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation.
Okay. They wanted to reduce game limits to one deer?
No, they want us to be able to harvest 2 bucks and 4 does every year. The legislature, and by the way, this bill was put forth by an individual who has a private game ranch and hunting operation that he sells hunts on, put forth this amendment to say, no, Oklahomans and out-of-staters, you can only have 1 antlered deer per year.
Well, we have a problem there. There's a conflict of interest. Number one.
Yeah.
and
right?
Every time, we get into these conversations, there's always a conflict of interest. And that I don't understand why the common person in business practice can't legally do that. But then when you go, for some reason, go to the state house or federal level, like it's just common practice. But regardless, it's just wild. One deer, I don't know the dynamics of your deer herd down there. My guess is that it's fairly decent because you're allowing 6 deer to be harvested a year per hunter. It's kind of the same dynamic up here in Wisconsin. We can harvest a antlered buck with bow and gun, and then they give us 2 or 3 bonus tags, and you can pretty much buy as many as you want up here. They kind of want all the deer killed up here, but that's a whole other rabbit hole. I don't understand why a state would, unless their intentions are to drive down the number of out-of-state hunters that are accessing public land. I don't know why they would want to do these things. It kind of comes back to this whole gut feeling I got about a lot of this is that, more or less it's public land, but they really don't want us there as sportsmen. The governments don't.
No.
It sure seems that way.
I concur with you. I spoke to a couple Army Corps of Engineers folks about the SB 208, and they're like, this is going to be a problem if Oklahoma says you can guide on public land, because a lot of our lakes are public land under Army Corps of Engineer control, meaning that the Army Corps of Engineers owns it, takes care of it, runs everything, all the land, while being huntable for Oklahomans and out-of-staters is Army Corps of Engineer land. And you, according to Article 500 under the Army Corps of Engineers, cannot guide or have paid guiding services operating on their land. And they were like, this is horrifying, the new version of the bill, because it's going to create so much of a problem. Because people are going to have to be very understanding of where they are. And you are going to have to trust your guide to know if they're operating where they should be or where they shouldn't be. And I think for good guides, like people like yourself, that's not going to be an issue, but we have a problem with not so good guides here in Oklahoma. In fact, they busted the same group of the same guides running the same operation under the same name for hunting multiple baited holes 2 years in a row for ducks.
Well, that's kind of a big no-no.
Yeah.
Right. And the fact that fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Like, what's going on there?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question, because I Googled it and then I found out that there's a whole, there are forums that are out there that are dedicated to how to bait wildlife without getting caught. A lot of it revolving around duck and goose hunting. And I was like, oh Lord.
So I'm just going to say it.
This is not good.
These are the reasons that our public land is up for sale. These are the reasons that hunters in America often get the short end of the stick, and fishermen, because we make ourselves look bad. Like, I mean, I just don't understand it. Maybe it's because I, beat a little bit of a different drum than most folks, but and at least that's what I'm going to tell myself. But, if you're not that great of a hunter and you have to resort to going on a forum to discuss how you can get around the legal laws of baiting, you shouldn't be. And this is kind of where my gripe is with some of these conservation groups in R3. Like, are we attracting this because we're wanting new hunters so bad that we'll take anybody and not necessarily introduce them to the outdoors the right way, that now they've resorted? And I don't know. Maybe it's some of these old school cats that just can't get over some of these new laws. I don't know, but my point to all that is man, we got to stop shooting ourselves in the foot. Yeah.
100% agree. And part of me, in part of the public land advocate perspective, is we aren't doing ourselves a favor with social media, and showing people, like parading dead and dying animals around. And I know that chaps some people, but I only show trophy pictures to my family and to people who care. I have tried to make it a point on my Instagram to not showcase that part of hunting, the dead and dying animals, and I think that breeds jealousy for a lot of people.
It does.
I'll tell you,
it does 100%. And I'm guilty of it. I see people with a huge spread, and I'm like, man, I gotta go. I gotta get out there, and that's not a good trade. My argument with it is I mean, if you go to my social media page, it's limited, but at the same time, like I'm a bird hunting guide. Like, how do I position myself as a business to showcase kind of what we've done, but on the same token, not give fuel to the other side.
Mm-hmm. And I completely see your side of things. I had a long conversation with a guy I bumped into in Ohio when I was up visiting family, who is a waterfowl guide. He's like, you can show the fast boat thing, you can show the spread, the early morning guys cooking in the blind, but he's like, every once in a while, you got to throw a pile pickup so people know you actually kill birds. And I'm like, no, you're in a different category because it's your job. It would, it's not, you're not Cam Haynes posting 20 bull elk in a year on your Instagram, 20 different bull elk that you killed, right? You're not any of the guys who are doing the turkey slams posting like, hey, in 8 days I was in all these different places and I completed the North American Grand Slam. And I think the difference is you treat the animals with respect as a guide, and a lot of these guys are doing it to get attention. And that makes people jealous. And I'll tell you, I was fortunate enough at the time to have harvested a buck that was inside the top 100 biggest bucks in Oklahoma. And I shared a picture to the Oklahoma or bow hunters of Oklahoma, and I had so many negative responses from people who were upset. So much so that I had to speak to a game warden in the county I harvested the deer with and fill out an affidavit that what I told him was true because of the rumors that people had started.
Unreal.
And I was like, ever since then, I'm like, I don't want to post any more pictures, no matter how much of a good day it is, no matter how many different species of ducks or upland birds I harvest. I said, I'm not doing this because, I was like, it took something that was amazing for me, because the story going into it is I had a hip surgery to repair some stuff, middle of July that year. Unfortunately, that operation was unsuccessful. The doctors were like, we don't know if you'll be able to pull a deer out of the woods, if you'll be able to, what your quality of life is going to look like. And that was like the culmination of the season. And that whole story is a uproariously hilarious story. Almost ended my relationship with my fiance. And to me, I shared something because I was like, oh man, I did all these things this year that somebody said I would, like, was questionable if I'd even be able to do this. And for people to let their jealousy rule the day, I was like, I don't need any type of that headache. And if this is what the hunting communities come down to, no wonder people look at us and get upset, right? It's just another instance of where we're shooting ourselves in the foot as a community.
It's a tough spot, man. It's a heritage, and I'm not afraid to say it. Some of that heritage is good old boy kind of heritage, and I don't think a lot of this is necessarily learned behavior. I think it's the birth of social media and hunting, and it's a tough spot. I was actually off social media I got on it after high school. I'm 41. For about 15 years, I did have a single social media account. And when I started my business, I got back on social media, and it really doesn't bring anything of value to my personal life. We'll put it that way. There's really I've met some really cool people, which is about the only thing I can think of that's been a positive in my personal life since re-entering social media. Outside of that, for business, it's just, it's a marketing tool, and I hate to, listeners, they should know that by now, but, it's a tough spot. I look at this a lot, and I think about this a lot, and, I hate to say that I'm on a pedestal, because I'm not. I try to be as humble as all possible, but there's a personal I just want to do better. And it's not necessarily that I want to show anybody that I'm doing better. It's just, I personally want to do better. You know, a lot of this advocacy, the podcast and all of that is done out of this core goal of wanting to kind of leave a legacy that impacts the availability of, or the impacts people's access and availability to hunt and do the things that I've done in my life. I feel very privileged that, you know, I can run bird dogs the number of days that I do a year and the amount of fishing that I've done in the past. And I want people to be able to do that in the future. So that's kind of why I've got on a soapbox and started a podcast. And, you know, that's kind of the whole, I guess, thing that it's morphed into. But at the end of the day, you know, we have to we can point fingers all we want, but it's the standing in the mirror and being cool with yourself that really we all need to focus on. And I think if we did that, it would clean up a lot of this other mess.
Yeah, most certainly. I that's why I started down this journey. Is I looked in the mirror and I said, if I care about this as much as I do, to where I spend so much time in the woods, so much time admiring the animals that I pursue, whether it's wildlife or fish or any combination of that. I need to give a voice to make that better. So I can say, hey, yeah, I've gone out and been blessed to harvest big animals in my life. But I can say that I gave back more than I ever took. And that's what I want to do. I want more people to see sunrises. You know, so that's one of my favorite things to do in the duck blind if it's slow, is take a picture of the sunrise. And I show those are the pictures I like to show because it's like, this is beautiful. You know, how often do you get to see the sunrise and you watch the world come to life around you? And I'm not talking about in the city or whatnot, but you listen to the animals come alive and the world starts to make its noise. And yeah, sometimes we're blessed enough to harvest great things. And sometimes we go home empty-handed, but I got to take home that picture of the sunrise that day, or I got to take home, cool pictures of wildlife. And those are things that we can share with other people and be like, hey, come outdoors. And that's how we turn into the stewards of the outdoors that you and I both seem to be in agreement that we want to see, because I think R3 is great. We should expose more people to the outdoors, but we need to help them, right? It's not just go to your bow shop, buy a bow, buy a saddle and a stand and some climbing sticks and some arrows and a target. It's like, hey, have the appreciation for what this is. And that's one of the big things I hear lacking from that social media side is like, oh yeah, I went out and I harvested this deer and it's my 10th of the season and I don't sound like I enjoy this. And you're like, man, I'm happy when I see a deer. Most times I'm happy when I see a mallard or a pintail or gadwall or teal or any duck. I'm going to say any duck. I am not a mallard purist by any means. When I see a duck feet down, come into the decoys, I am like a kid on Christmas. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And my hunting buddy and I, we will be the first people to tell you we would kill more ducks if we spent less time watching them. Because we've had ducks land in the decoys and we both sit there and like one of us will look at the other and be like, that's nice. And then they get up to fly away. We're like, oh, man, what are we doing? They were on the water. They were right there. Whoops. And I'm sure, you've had times where you see a grouse or a pheasant or quail get up and you're like, yeah. Oh, I'm here hunting. That's what I'm supposed to be doing now.
Well, I'm being a grouse and woodcock hunter, there's it's not like quail hunting. Like you have to take your opportunity when it's there. There's no,
Okay.
you know, I mean, you can't, we're hunting thick timber. So there's no swinging a gun. Typically it's like, put the gun up, put it on the bird and pull. So it's one of the reasons why I actually started guiding. Because I'm not a very good shot, you know, so I've watched these birds fly away for years, and I kind of felt like, well, you know, maybe I can find some guys that are a little better and my dogs might get a treat. But, in full honesty, I carry a gun very little over the season. I'm out well over 100 days a year, but I bet you I have a gun in my hand less than 30. And this year I'll probably be out closer to 120 plus, because I'm going to be guiding down in New Mexico, and I won't even carry. I won't be shooting quail down there. So, and then I've got my whole spring training season where, you know, I don't have a problem carrying a blank pistol, but man, I love watching those birds fly away, watching it coming up on a doggone point, flushing that bird, and watching it fly away. I have no problem with that. That's why I do what I do. You know, it's why I guide, because I don't have to kill anymore. I've kind of reached that point in life where, do I love to eat grouse? Yeah. Am I going to go out and shoot a few every year? Absolutely. You know, I think I harvested 10 birds last year. But you know, there was a decade ago, I had to kill every weekend. I wasn't happy. And it just kind of changes, and, you know, over time, you know, I wasn't doing it for the dogs back then. I was doing it for me. And now I wouldn't go hunting if I didn't have a dog out. So,
right.
Totally different paradigm shift, you know?
Yeah, I feel that in my soul, though. Like, the way you were talking about it, I'm like, yes, I feel that, because I think I told you when we were on Instagram, my dad trains dogs too, up in Ohio, at the Sportsman's Club that he does, to point pheasants. And I used to go back with them to that club and shoot their calendar. They would do a Thanksgiving Day and the day Christmas Eve hunt, release bird hunt, and I would go up and take pictures of the hunters, and I would put together a little calendar for them. And I really, like, I was like, I wanted to hunt, but at the same time, you know, when you catch the right photo of a bird coming up, or you see a guy who's never gotten close enough to a pheasant to have its wings hit him in the pant legs coming up, like, those are things that it just, it's hard to describe how much I like to see those things compared to pulling a gun up and putting it on a bird.
The way I look at it is you can always do that. But it's seeing it from that different perspective. It's why I enjoy guiding so much, is because I get to watch people interact with my dog. And I don't know, maybe I'm just lucky. I get customers who are super appreciative to just harvest a bird, let alone a few. And that, to me, that combo of having my dog work for somebody else and them achieving a goal, or achieving something that they, you know, had really wanted to do, there isn't anything better for me. That's that's the creme de la creme.
I love seeing the smile on a kid when they shoot their first pheasant. I don't think anything beats that, when they go out and they hunt behind a dog, whether it's my dad's dog or somebody else's, and the dog does the point, the kid goes up, and it looks just like every Pheasants Forever description you've ever seen, right? Bird comes up, folds it, the kid's beaming from ear to ear. I'm like, this is almost better than hunting. Most of the time it is better.
I agree. So we kind of touched on a lot of different things today. Wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of get, if there's anything else that you wanted to, you know, talk about real quick. We've got a little time. Otherwise, I kind of wanted to just kind of give that call to action for from the Public Land Advocate on what can be done with, you know, respect to the sale of public land, and obviously how do we police our own a little better.
Yeah, I honestly, we touched on all the topics I wanted to touch on. So yeah, I'll give that call to action. if you're listening and you are an outdoors person and you're not signing every petition that you can find, you're not sending an email, you are not helping us. And I can tell you from my personal experience, it takes you a minute. We all have 60 seconds in the day that we could stop scrolling on our phone or stop looking at our computer, and we can sign these petitions and get out there and do this. I think the sale of public land is one of the greatest dangers that our country faces, especially this one, because this one is set to redefine the Federal Land Transference Act, which you have specific methods from the Bureau of Land Management that it set forth. Number one being that the federal government sells any public land, that money must go back into public lands in some way, shape, or form. It cannot go back to the federal government. This bill from the House Natural Resources Committee to sell our public land would take that money forever out of public land. And if that doesn't scare you, to be a call to action, knowing that we're going to lose crucial bighorn sheep territory and elk territory in Nevada, in Utah, means that there will be less opportunities for us in the future. So how do we fix this? Head over to the TRCP, the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. Jump on their petition. After you do that, if you're a member of Ducks Unlimited, Delta Waterfowl, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, the National Deer Association, the National Wild Sheep Foundation, the National Wild Turkey Federation, or any other organization that's dedicated to hunting or fishing that cares to claim about public lands that has been quiet, either withdraw your membership or make noise. Because all of those organizations are massive, and right now they're quieter than church mice. After that, make a post on social media about public land, right? I think clamoring and being loud helps people see us. And we need to realize that right now, as hunters, fishers, campers, hikers, foragers, outdoors people, we have more allies than we've ever had before to oppose the sale of public land. But if we sit on our hands and hope that somebody else does the work for us, and next year your favorite hunting spot is gone, you're the one to blame. Because you didn't say anything. You didn't use your voice. And also, this is the first domino to fall, if it falls. And we can stop it from falling together. Because in every state in the United States, there is public land that's owned by the federal government. And just because this is a Nevada and Utah issue right now doesn't mean it's not going to be California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, New York State, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Wyoming, Montana, next. Because there's things that can be sold in every state, and if we change the way that it's sold now, we might not be able to oppose it in the future. So get out there, write a letter to your senator, congressman. If you don't want to do that, head over to the TRCP webpage, Instagram, Facebook page, where they have their pre-built letter set up in their system. All you got to do is put your information in, and they'll send that email for you to your senators and congress people with just a click of a button. And if we're not doing it and it goes away, fall and spring are going to be a lot more boring.
Well said. I don't have anything other to add than just get off your ass, please. Don't hesitate on this one. Even if you think it's a nothing burger, still do something. Because the precedent that this sets could have a very big negative domino effect for all outdoor recreating, from hiking to foraging to biking, hunting, fishing, on down the line. It just all you got to do is head on over. I'll include the link in the show notes.
Okay.
So all you have to do is click a link, at least get on the petition from the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, and take a few minutes to just, all you got to do is call and leave a message. Just call and leave a message for your congressperson. That's it. It's not that difficult. But most importantly, I think what you said to the folks that are listening out here, I'd argue that don't withdraw your membership from conservation organizations, but make some damn noise. Call them out. Where are you? Where are you is the big question. And we really need those conservation organizations to step up. You and I, we can call our congressperson, but those organizations have lobbyists in Washington tied to the same people who are writing this bill. They can make a huge impact, and we need them on board.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do.
Well, John, I really appreciate you making an hour and a half for amount of time for the listeners and I today.
Of course.
Let's stay in touch. If there's anything that is pressing on this issue, feel free to tag me on Instagram. For the listeners, one more time, head on over to the show notes, call your congressperson, call your senator, make some noise. Maybe that'll be the title. We need something a little bit more catchy. We'll figure that out on the backside. But I appreciate all the listeners today, and John, we'll be in touch here.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for having me on today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for taking the time to check out the latest episode of the Amazing Outdoors podcast. If you would, like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, you know the drill. I'll mention the podcast sponsors real quick. HW Launchers, hwlaunchers.com, Pigeon Launchers, Bird Launchers, Prairie Chicken Project of Wisconsin, Wisconsin Sharp-tailed Grouse Society, and RPM Training Products. If you're in consideration for coming up to hunt roughies up here in Wisconsin this year, things are lining up for a great time. I hired another guide, so we have plenty of openings. My personal dates, if you want to hunt with me, are getting a little limited. Head on over to www.amazin.com or give me a holler at 920-277-5750. I got to get out of here. Got a couple dogs I got to train. Got to get some plants in the ground, some crops. It's a beautiful spring. Get out there and enjoy it. I'm Brian Mays. We'll catch you on the next episode. Here we go. Right here. There's a woodcock.